Welcome back to The Full View. The NEHAWU strike at the South African Bureau of Standards, SABS, enters its fifth day with workers protesting against the company's restructuring process. Despite days of negotiations, no resolution has been reached. NEHAWU is now calling for the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Pakstau's intervention. Joining us to discuss this and to help us understand the impasse is NEHAWU's Regional Secretary, Zolani Masoleng. Zolani, good evening. Thank you so much for joining me. Appreciate it. Explain to us what the restructuring is. My understanding is, and please do correct me if I'm wrong here, is that the South African Bureau of Standards, following a survey and a market study, has decided to no longer pay its new employees a fringe benefits such as housing allowances and medical aid subsidies. And NEHAWU is opposing that. Explain to us where the impasse is coming in.
Good evening, sir, and good evening to your viewers at home. Look, our impasse with SABS is much bigger than the issue of new employees that have been hired very soon. That's just one of the problems out of many. Actually, SABS, what they did, they hired 47 graduates, and they decided to pay them salaries that were below the approved scale. But that's not only the problem. Even many workers at SABS who have been there much longer than the new graduates are also paid below their scale. Their total number is about 143 workers who are still paid below their scale, and they've been there for many years. And the net effect of that is that people are sitting in jobs that they've been placed on, only enjoying those jobs in title, but the money they are being paid is not even at the minimum of the scale. And we don't have to make this.
Zolani, can I just ask there, how are these scales determined? Is it determined through a bargaining process, or does SABS set these scales?
What actually happened is that they solicited their own remuneration specialist who did a market survey of these scales. And it was not even something that we as NEHAWU, who were party to it and decided on this scale or that scale. It's something that is done by remuneration experts. And then once they do a market survey, they are able to say that a particular job A, in the market, it pays 100,000 as a minimum, maybe 300,000 as a maximum, with midpoints in between. And that information, they did receive it from their own specialist in remuneration, not even in the NEHAWU process. And that process said, you are paying workers, you are underpaying workers, and you need to move many workers to the midpoint of the scale. And as a minimum, no one should be paid below the minimum of the scale. And the reality that is happening at SABS is that there is exploitation. As we are standing, 172 workers are paid below the minimum of the scale, and there is still about 208 who are in the bargaining unit who must also still be paid at the midpoint as a very least. But if you add those who are outside the bargaining process, that number rises up to 327. So in actual fact, after this entire restructuring process, it is such that even the specialists in remuneration are saying, you are underpaying your workers, you are not paying them correctly, they have titles but they don't have the money. And we say, we are not demanding anything extra.
Yeah.
We're just demanding that you pay workers correctly according to where they should be paid.
Has NEHAWU, as a matter of fact, had sight of the pay scale survey that was done by the market data survey?
We did have that information. They shared it with us. And in actual fact, it is one of the recommendations of the company they solicited to do the market survey that you need to move your employees to the midpoint. Okay. And actually, our demand is centered around the recommendation of that remuneration expert company to say, move them to the minimum, and they are refusing. And we are saying, if you are unable then to move them to the midpoint, there is a scale just above the minimum, which we can talk to the lower guide. Yeah. They are also still refusing that. So you have a situation where the employer is refusing to pay workers what is due to them.
What is the argument?
Paying them less.
Zolani, what is the argument made by SABS executives about why it is that they cannot effect the recommendations of this pay scale survey?
Their argument, their main argument, let alone others really, is that of affordability. But we have questioned that and actually even dismiss it, to say you can't continue to maintain the status quo at our expense. You are paying yourselves as the executives correctly. So if a job pays 100,000 as a minimum, there is no ethical or even moral basis for you to pay somebody 70,000 for that job. So the question of affordability cannot only be thrown at us as workers when every other aspect of spending is left as it is. So for us to be able to look at the issue of affordability, it must be looked at in a very broad spectrum in terms of what is it that needs to happen.
Yeah, Zolani, thank you so much for your time and your insights. Really do appreciate it. Look, we did reach out to the South African Bureau of Standards to no success. Once we receive a response from them with regards to this impasse, we will broadcast that to you. But to this now, teacher union SATU is threatening to march to the union buildings to demand the signing into law of the Bella Bill, the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act. Basic Education Minister Siviwe Kwarube wants President Ramaphosa to send it back to Parliament. Let's now talk to Zolani Fakude, the Secretariat Officer of the South African Democratic Teachers Union. Perhaps to start the conversation here, Mr. Fakude, and Red, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. The Democratic Alliance has raised, along with various other stakeholders, have raised various issues with regards to the Bella Bill, such as the concentration of powers in the hands of the provincial departmental secretariats and heads of departments, rather than in school governing bodies around things such as the determination of language policy and admission policy, but also a draconian limitation, they argue, to autonomy of parents who are opting to homeschool their learners. They say that the bill as it stands does not address those concerns. Despite that, SATU is asking for the president to sign it into law. What's your response to that?
Thank you very much, Oliver. Firstly, let me greet you. Let me greet the viewers as well. Our view is very, very clear as the South African Democratic Teachers Union. It is that the Bella Bill, by every means, is intended to transform the education system. In fact, what the Bella Bill does is that it seeks to ensure that what you have is that you've got a bill, you've got an act, which is right in tune with the developments in the basic education sector space. Now, we are saying that the bill has gone through a process of no less than 10 years of consultations, 2 public consultations for that matter. It has gone through the National Assembly. It has gone through the National Council of Provinces. And therefore, there is absolutely no need why the president should delay any day. In fact, we are saying the president should have signed the bill as in yesterday, because in our view, the bill seeks to address some of the historic injustices that we have seen characterized, or rather whose symptoms we have seen coming out of the basic education system, such as the unequal language policies, such as how some school governing bodies actually have even abused their powers, exploited their powers literally to discriminate against learners from other groups using issues such as the language policy that then affect the admissions policy. So we are very, very clear as SATU that the president should sign the bill. The bill has gone through all constitutional processes that are required. It has gone through two public rounds, for that matter, of consultations. And therefore, there is no reason why the president should not sign this bill as a matter of urgency.
Yeah, the Democratic Alliance also impugns the provision in the bill around homeschooling and giving parents autonomy around that. They argue that it limits the options and autonomy of parents who are opting to homeschool. What's SATU's response to that?
Well, we don't believe so. In fact, what the bill seeks to do, for those who have read it and appreciate its content, is that it seeks to regulate some of those spaces. It seems to bring them some way, one way or the other, within the mainstream so that there can be accountability. What we want is accountability. Homeschooling does not by any means mean that you then operate outside of the mainstream of education framework, which we are looking towards in terms of policy. And therefore, we are saying that the bill, by the way, Oliver, does not only speak about homeschooling. It speaks about a compulsory grade R, introduction of grade R. It speaks about learner attendance. It speaks about making a criminal offense when you try and target schools, it is an offense against the state when you target schools in terms of, because we have seen, for instance, just now in the recent school holidays, we have seen a number of schools that were vandalized, and therefore it seeks to even criminalize those actions, because the bill seeks to say that education is for all and education should be accessible to all.
They also argue, the Democratic Alliance, that is, that parts of this bill will remain unfunded and that it could lead to provincial authorities having to use budgets from key functions such as the National Nutrition Program to fund other parts of the bill, leaving a great deal of financial burden on provincial authorities. Do you have a response to that?
Yeah, well, we do. Look, as a matter of fact, Oliver, there is no bill that is perfect. But then that is why you have got the rules and regulations that then manage some of the implications of the bill. By the way, we have got a lived experience. What we are doing right now as SATU, we are busy talking to like-minded organizations that are equally concerned like us, because they think equally that the Bella bill is transformative. We are busy engaging them and preparing possibly that at some point we might even get to a stage whereby we go through a mass protest. We have done this through the Copyright Amendment Bill. We worked with organizations such as Blind SA, and then we found ourselves actually having the president eventually signed the bill. It went almost through the similar processes. After years of consultation, we then had progress of private capital, in this case being the Democratic Alliance, doing everything in their power to stop the president from signing the bill. This is exactly what we see now happening with the Bella bill, and we are going to stand against that. We are saying that the bill is transformative. What we want is an equal and equitable education system that embraces social justice, and we are going to fight for it, and we are prepared to defend this bill, Oliver.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. That is the Secretary Officer of the South African Democratic Teachers Union, Zolani Masoleng.